Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. Little warning before we jump into anything today. We are going to be looking at the launch trailer for Witch Queen and breaking down and analysing that. It's not necessarily going to be as long as the trailer we did the other day, but hopefully it's going to have better audio. I'm doing this in a different way during the edit, and hopefully that means that we won't have any nonsense going on. It's also going to be a bit more scripted this time, because doing things so quickly and off the cuff did not seem to work out last time, so we're going to try something a little bit more prepared. Also, this is your spoiler warning if you are someone who cares about not seeing anything before the release of Witch Queen. This definitely has story beats in it, and little bits and pieces of the story from Witch Queen are revealed throughout that we've not seen before. Exciting for those of us who really want to see them, but this is the time when you should really get off the internet if you don't want to be spoiled. Maybe go ahead and wait around until the beginning of the final mission of the Season of the Lost, which should also be dropping today, later down the line. So, if you have that particular requirement to stay spoiler-free, go ahead and switch off now. For the rest of us, let's begin.
Hello, old friend. I've chased you for a long time.
First things first, here we see a version of Savathun that seems to be after the exorcism that we'll be performing at the end of the Season of the Lost, but maybe before she's claimed the light. Savathun doesn't have her crown or her wings in this shot, and it's clearly closer to her old dark self. Savathun here says, "Hello, old friend, I've chased you for a long time." There are two possible people I think she's saying this to. The first is less likely, but I think it's a much more fascinating theory, and I think it's the old Krill sterile mother known as Teox. For those of you who don't know, Teox is a character from very early on in the Hive lore, when they weren't even known as the Hive, they were known as the Krill. She betrayed Savathun, Oryx, and Xivu Arath when they were all children and didn't even bear those names, and she is effectively the reason that the Hive have now made a pact with the Dark Worm Gods and the darkness generally. This is one of those moments at which you sit there and you have to think to yourself, maybe this is a character that Savathun could address like this. And the reason for this is because, well, they did chase her for a long time. Pursuing Teox is something that took the Hive not only into the process of conquering their original homeworld of Fundament, well, original is a stretch, it appears that they originally crash-landed on it from another planet, but whole other story. But the point is, the Hive have pursued and chased Teox across the universe. They chased her all the way up to the conflict with a massive star empire known as the Ecumene, and that is something which has definitely impacted the story of Savathun, Oryx, and Xivu Arath. So that's the first possibility of who Savathun is talking to here. The second possibility, the one that I think is much more likely, is simply that Savathun is talking to the Traveller. This is an object that the Hive and the Darkness have chased across the universe, and one with which now Savathun can commune in order to obtain the light. It is not clear if that's what's going on, it's not clear if that's what'll happen, but I'd be fascinated to see which one of these it is, or if it's some third possibility that I'm not thinking about.
Savathun, the Witch Queen. She infiltrated the Vanguard, weakening us from within. Stealing our most sacred resource.
Here we yet again see scenes from Fundament, which again was the homeworld of the Hive before they were known as the Hive, before they embraced the darkness, and we see Savathun in a key moment in her storytelling. At this moment, she is known as Sathona. She is not ascended into a Hive god, and she is one of the Krill, who is the proto-Hive species. Savathun, in this instance, as Sathona, is holding her father's familiar, one of the worms, the symbiote worms, that was clearly gifted to her father through some kind of proxy means by the worm gods. I say gifted in the sense that it was a familiar that washed up one day on the shores of their family's controlled territory, the Osmium Court, And this is one of those really influential moments because, much like in Ahamkara, this dead familiar started whispering to their father and telling him about an apocalypse that would be presided over on their world. An apocalypse which was known better as the God Wave, triggered by something called a syzygy. For those of you who don't know what a syzygy is, that's basically the alignment of many celestial bodies or just two celestial bodies. The idea in Fundament's case is that all 52 of its moons would align, and this would create a massive force of gravity. Because Fundament was a gas giant with an ocean layer beneath that, you would have one particular portion of the ocean pulled upwards by that massive force of gravity. When the syzygy had passed, the moons would release that water, and it would spill outwards from that point in a massive god wave that would consume the world. Essentially, if you really want the basics version of this, think of this as the story of the wrathful god from Noah's Ark in the Bible stories. This is that, except it's done by the means of gravity and the moons, and maybe there's a wrathful god behind it, depending on what you think, maybe not. The reason I say that is because it's implied in the stories of the Books of Sorrow that the Traveller was the one to have caused this. But there's also an equally valid theory that states that it might have been the Darkness, and the reason I say that is because we have seen the Darkness use weapons that employ gravity to great effect. We saw almost an exact version of this event happening on Titan during the Golden Age. The Last Days on Kraken Mare is a lore book that we got from back in, I believe it was Shadowkeep, and it displays how the Darkness used its particularly devastating gravity wave weapons in order to do something almost identical to the God Wave. So who really caused the God Wave is going to be a topic of discussion, and this moment here, where Savathûn is holding that familiar, is probably going to be a little bit of an expansion on that moment in the story. I think that we're going to see what happened back in the days of the Proto-Hive, and I think that's also the reason why later we see the Worm Gods rising out of the ocean, because the Worm Gods helped the Hive escape that planet. Again, this is all before they were actually known as the Hive, and part of the way of them making that escape was the pact that they made in the deep Fundament oceans, one that allowed Sathona and Aurash and Shiro to ascend into godlike forms, the terrible Hive deities that we would know later down the line.
The light.
How do we stop this?
Here we see Zavala, and yet again he is punching his desk. However, he's clearly punching it over what seems to be a dead worm potentially from inside Savathûn, the worm that was excised. If this is the case, then this cutscene might be the aftermath of the Season of the Lost, or maybe the very beginning of Witch Queen, one where we start to understand what exactly has happened and how the deception of Savathûn has played out. It's very interesting to see where this will line up in things, because it maybe tells us a little bit about how the progression of the Season of the Lost will go. Now here we see a really small detail, but an interesting one in terms of mechanics. We can see that you can fly ships into the Throne World. I wonder what mechanism is used to do this, considering that the Throne World is a pocket dimension, and it's going to be really interesting finding a way to physically take your ship from one pocket universe into the main universe, or vice versa. Interesting stuff. This isn't the first time we've heard of something like this being done in Destiny, though. I believe it was the Agents of the Cryptocrons, a group that was studying the Black Garden, who sent a group of 3 Guardians in there, and they made that jump using a jump ship through a Vex Gate. Maybe we'll be doing something similar, and the gateway into Savathûn's Throne World is just so massive that we can actually physically access it by flying a ship through. If so, that's pretty cool.
Welcome back, O honored guest.
Savathûn here says, "Welcome back, O honored guest." Here's the thing, I don't know if this is referring to us. We've only entered the Throne World this first time, as best I know. Either this is later in the campaign, or Savathûn here is referring to someone other than us. And if that is the case, I wonder who that might be. My immediate guess is to go back, once again, to the Teox Spinfoil type line. Welcome back is something that might more adequately apply to her than to us. It's Spinfoil, but keep that theory in mind. Certainly something I'm doing. More so than this as well, I think it's worth noting that this could actually be nothing, and welcome back, O honoured guest, could be addressed at us, but, let's keep the possibilities in the back of our head.
It is the mind that must bend to see the truths hidden here.
Here we see what I think we can confirm to be the Deep Sight ability. For those of you that don't know, go ahead and look at all the nodes of the interactive trailer released by Bungie a few days ago. Not only is that a fantastic story primer for all of you, but also it's going to be something that allows you to look into the deeper elements of what you'll be doing in Witch Queen, one of which is Deep Sight. Deep Sight is an ability that apparently we have gained from the darkness, and it's something that allows us to see the truth in Savathûn's throne world. It seems as though it's going to be a little bit like the Ascendancy mechanic within the Shattered Throne and the Dreaming City's Ascendant Plane realms generally. So this is something that we will have to keep in mind if we want to discover what's actually going on in the throne world. Really cool idea, and something that we have seen before, but considering that this has a component to which it's also supposedly used in the weapons of the crafting system, I feel like there's a really interesting direction in which all of this is suddenly pointing. It's an odd little detail here, but it's definitely one worth pointing out, even if it is a bit gruesome. This is the new exotic grenade launcher known as Parasite. It shoots hive worms. Also, go ahead and take a look more closely, in particular at the ammo counter of Parasite. Yes, that is 1 on there to indicate that there is a worm in the tube. A round in the tube. There's ammo in the gun. It's a worm. A worm is in the gun. Point being, the gun then gets shot and that changes to a 0. And previously, where there had been a heart rate monitor, now there is a flat line. Ouch.
The game is yours to play now.
This Ascendant Hive imbued with the light is a very strange beast. Yeah, they're kind of the same thing as Alak-Hul / the Darkblade, but I don't think that means we should draw any assumptions story-wise. All I'd say is that it's very clear that this is a very powerful hive, and it will be interesting to see what they do in the campaign context, if they're just a really large boss that we end up facing, or if they have some more development. I don't know. Either way, this seems to be a rather important stage in the story. You can also see that this is in the same area as that statue of Oryx and Akka fighting, which I pointed out in a previous trailer, so that's kind of fun. Now, I didn't want to point this out at first, but then I looked at it again and I figured that I really should point this particular Scorn out. Yeah, there are Scorn in Savathûn's throne world, that's nothing new. But I, for one, can't remember any Scorn that are like this with this particular character model, and I also remember that very few of them actually have 4 arms. I think it's just the Chieftains and maybe the Wraiths that do, but none of them look like this, which tells me that this is one of 2 things. Either Bungie is introducing a new enemy to the Scorn faction, or, if they're being very daring, this is a new character. Either a strike boss with some kind of story, or alternatively, a character that we might interact with. We have seen screenshots of a single random Scorn just lying around in the throne world previously, in almost an NPC type fashion, so it makes me wonder whether that's the case or not. Keep an eye out for the Scorn. It's still not clear what part they'll play in the Witch Queen story, but it's clear that they'll be playing a part somehow.
Just don't say I didn't warn you.
Finally, let's go ahead and look at Savathûn's last few words in the trailer. The last 2 lines of dialogue combined read, "The game is yours to play now. Just don't say I didn't warn you." Rather ominous when you go ahead and combine that with the fact that those last few words are spoken over the shot of the pyramid ship found within the swamps of her throne world. Whatever ancient evil lies within that is the raid boss. We have known this for a very long time, and Savathûn's last words on that particular note are ominous to say the least, but I think that they point to something even more key, which we've said many a time, both myself and many other YouTubers. We even said this back in the days of Evan and I predicting our Witch Queen story notes, which was simply that Savathûn will not be the raid boss. I think Savathûn is in the story, and that is it. Regardless, we'll have to go ahead and see about that when the time comes, and we'll have to see what happens. In the meantime though, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, go ahead and let me know by leaving a like, and if you have any thoughts of your own, go ahead and leave them down below in the comments section. Tell me, what do you think is going on with those earlier scenes of Savathûn? Those are the ones that fascinate me the most, because we've never seen her quite like that. I'm personally pretty set on what my opinion is, but honestly, we have no idea what's going on with that. I'd love to see what you all think, and whether you believe one thing over another, because at the end of the day, Savathûn's mysteries are going to be the thing that we have to unravel over the next few weeks or so. Very exciting stuff. In the meantime though, thank you very much for watching, and know that as per usual, your viewership is quite enough for me. And that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Rhodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.